Perhaps the most common question that people ask about chickens is, why are my chickens not laying? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and I hope to cover them all in this video. If I miss some, please leave some comments below. I'll leave a summary of all of the possible reasons that I know about in the description below, along with all of the links that I mention. Because there are so many reasons, this is rather a long video, so let's get started. Yes, shall we get started?
Of course, you don't expect baby chicks to lay eggs as soon as they hatch. But how long do you have to wait for that first egg from a growing pullet? Well, that depends on a number of factors, and I have a whole video about it. I'll leave a link in the description below. But it mostly comes down to the time of year when they hatched and their breed. The commercial hybrids will come into lay at about 4 months old, while the heritage breeds will probably take twice as long. As they get older, the number of eggs that a hen lays each year will usually get less and less. That's why commercial egg farmers dispose of their flock when they're about 18 months old. After that they continue to lay, but are considered to be not productive enough to be worth their keep. The heritage breeds usually lay quite well for a number of years, but again the number they lay each year usually decreases slowly. There are exceptions. This leghorn laid more eggs this year as a 3-year-old than last year when she was a 2-year-old. The oldest hen I have at the moment is this Araucana. She never was the greatest of layers, and this season, at 8 years old, she laid only 23 eggs. Even when your hens are laying well, you can't expect an egg every day for weeks on end. A good layer will lay for 6 or 7 days in a row before taking a day off. A great layer might lay for 10 days in a row. And if you have a few hens, it's sometimes going to happen that they all have a day off on the same day, which can be very disappointing when you find no eggs in the nest box. But just be grateful for all the eggs they laid for you the other days. There is no doubt that the hen that lays the most eggs in a year will be one of the commercial hybrids. Since the 1950s, huge agro-industrial companies have invested millions of dollars in research and continue to employ specialists in flock management, hatchery management, veterinary medicine, microbiology and nutrition to continue to improve the profit potential, even using DNA fingerprinting to identify hens with the best genes by analysing markers in their chromosomes. Amongst the heritage breeds, some are known as better layers than others, and you'll find charts published that show that you can expect, for example, 200 eggs per year from a Wyandotte and 240 from a Leghorn, and a claim that you can expect 260 from a Sussex. But in reality, a lot of the heritage breed chickens have been bred over recent generations for looks, to make sure they conform to the breed standard for showing in your country. And of course, in a bird show, all anyone can see is what they look like. So egg production is not measured and often not bred for. As a result, the actual number of eggs you will get from heritage breed hens depends greatly on their particular strain. I did get over 200 eggs this year from Isabella, a leghorn, but I found that Wyandottes lay no more than about 150 eggs a year, and my light Sussex hit 150 only in her best year, and at 3 years old laid only 114 this year. So by all means use charts like this as a general guide, but get real information about the parents of the actual chickens you are buying, or you'll probably be disappointed. If you're quick at maths, you might have realised that laying an egg on average even 6 days in a row and then taking 1 day off adds up to over 300 eggs a year. But heritage bred hens living in normal daylight conditions don't lay for a whole year all year round. In the autumn, once the number of hours of daylight drops below 14 hours a day, her reproductive cycle tails off, and she stops laying eggs until spring, when the day length grows long enough again. Some breeds are better at laying in winter than others. Right now, our day length is only 10 hours, but I still have one leghorn laying almost every day. The commercial hybrids are bred to be less sensitive to day length, plus commercial egg farmers will use artificial lighting to lengthen the number of hours of daylight to 14 to 16 hours a day, so that shoppers can reliably buy eggs from the supermarket all year round. Some people who keep just a few chickens also use additional lighting to artificially lengthen the day and encourage their hens to lay all year round. But for me, I think it's kinder to let them take a natural break after months of producing an egg every day. I do try to get some eggs through the winter by having some young pullets just come in to lay in late summer. Then they will lay all through that winter and the next summer before taking their first break the following autumn. But I have to admit, I'm successful at that only about half the time. In some years I've had a couple of months with no eggs at all. During the autumn, the hen will also be replacing all her feathers with fresh new ones in a process called molting. A molting hen looks very ragged, and she acts pretty crotchety too. Those new feathers poking through must be uncomfortable. It takes a lot of food and energy to make feathers, so your hens still need their high protein feed, even though they're using it to make feathers instead of to make eggs. She won't start laying again until at least she has all her feathers again. If a hen is broody, she doesn't want to lay any more eggs. She just wants to sit on the ones she has and hatch them out. That makes sense. Once a hen starts brooding the eggs, the chicks inside start to develop, and they'll be much better off if they all hatch at once. So broodiness is one reason why a hen might not be laying any more eggs. If you don't want her to hatch chicks, or if the eggs are not fertile, you should gently discourage her broodiness. I have a video about how I do that. I'll put a link to it in the description below. If a broody hen sits on the eggs for 3 weeks until they hatch, it's likely to take at least 6 weeks before she comes back on the lay again. During this time, she's probably looking after the growing chicks, but even if you separate her from the chicks, it will probably still be about the same length of time before her body recovers from the stress of brooding and she's ready to lay eggs again. Eggs are made of lots of protein. There's about 6 grams of protein in each egg, so it makes sense that a laying hen needs lots of protein in her diet. Most commercial feeds for laying hens have about 16 to 18% protein concentration. I talk about the protein content of chicken feed in one of my earliest videos. One thing to bear in mind is that commercial feed for laying hens is finely tuned for the needs of the commercial hybrid chickens that are used in industrial egg farms. These hybrids have been bred for generations to produce lots of eggs on the smallest possible input of feed, and the feed might not necessarily be ideal for heritage bred hens. So I like to choose feed at the high end of the range of protein, and also feed protein-rich treats like mealworms. I have a video about how to grow your own mealworms so they cost almost nothing. Again, I've put links to all these videos in the description below. As well as protein, chickens need vitamins and minerals just as much as we do. Of course, they need calcium to make the eggshells out of. Most commercial feed for laying hens will be supplemented with calcium, but it's also a good idea to provide extra shell grit. My very first and rather amateurish video was about how to recycle your eggshells for shell grit for your chickens. The other minerals like iron, sodium, iodine and chloride are likely to be plentiful in a commercial chicken feed, but if you're mixing grains and cereals as a feed for your chickens, you probably need to consider a mineral supplement. As for vitamins, free-range chickens will pick up what they need from fresh greens, and commercial feed is usually guaranteed to contain a minimum number of vitamins as long as it is fresh. The exception is vitamin D, which chickens will make in their own bodies as long as they get enough sunlight. They need vitamin D to absorb and metabolize calcium properly. Just an hour or so out in real daylight each day makes a big difference. Chickens that spend all their time indoors will likely need vitamin D supplements in order to lay well. Toxins. Mouldy food is a big one here, with mycotoxins having a bad effect on the health of your chickens and egg production. Keep your chicken food dry in a clean, closed container, and don't feed mouldy food to your chickens. Salt is another potential toxin. Even though chickens need some salt, too much salt is bad for them, so avoid feeding them overly salty kitchen scraps. Quite a large number of plants are poisonous to chickens, including rhododendrons, daffodils, ivy, oleander and foxgloves. The list depends on where you live. But chickens are foraging birds by nature and highly unlikely to eat these plants while free-ranging. Sheep, goats and cattle will eat toxic plants, but chickens seem to have more sense. If chickens do eat poisonous plants, it's likely to be because they were cooped up and had nothing else to choose from. For example, lots of sources say rhubarb leaves are poisonous to chickens, but some chicken owners know that their chickens do nibble the leaves of their growing rhubarb plants. Nevertheless, throwing a heap of rhubarb leaves into a bare chicken run would be asking for trouble. Much more likely toxins are pesticides, herbicides and other such chemicals. This is something you should be careful about, especially if you're gathering wild forage for your chickens. Weeds and other forage is a great and free source of goodness packed greens for your chickens. Check out my video on that. Even if you provide good feed, depending on how you make it available, some chickens lowest on the pecking order might not get enough because the more dominant hens don't give them a chance at the food. If she's not getting much food, she won't be able to lay well. So make sure you allow several opportunities for feeding, either by using several feeding stations in different places so every chicken gets a chance, or a feeder that the chickens can access all through the day. Even more important than their feed is water. A lot of water is needed to make an egg. If chickens run out of water, even for a few hours, or refuse to drink as much as they need because it's unappetizing, their production of eggs will drop. I have a video about the importance of fresh, clean water, and also one about my favourite container to provide that water in. Links to both of these below. In hot weather they need to drink more, so encourage them by making sure the water is cool and fresh and appetizing. A really hot day can be enough to put your chickens off the lay as they struggle to keep cool and hydrated. So in the hot summer, make sure your chickens have shade and ventilation, as well as plenty of that cool, fresh water. Chickens are not as affected by the cold as they are by the heat. As long as they stay fairly dry, they can cope with temperatures below freezing, although large combs and wattles can be subject to frostbite. but in cold weather they need more energy just to maintain their own body temperature. So if you want them to lay through the winter, try increasing their calorie intake with extra grains and fats so they have enough energy to make eggs as well as keeping warm. Any kind of stress can put your chickens off the lay. It might be a dog or children that chase them around relentlessly, or even an overzealous rooster. But the most common time for chickens to get stressed and stop laying is when you first get them. They were laying perfectly well for their previous owner, but within a few days of you getting them home, they go off the lay, and you wonder whether you were doing something wrong or just bought some dud hens. It could be a change of diet, so it's always worthwhile finding out what the previous owner fed them. But it might also be the stress of being transported and then coping with finding a place in the pecking order of a whole flock of strangers. Parasites like mites and lice and internal worms feed on the blood and body of chickens. If the infestation is bad enough, the chickens will become so anemic that they go off the lay, become really unwell, lose weight, and even have trouble getting enough oxygen. It is difficult to keep your chickens and coop completely free of parasites, especially if they free range and have contact with wild birds. So do check for lice occasionally, notice anything odd about your chickens' droppings, and check cracks and crevices in the coop for mites. Of course, a sick hen is not going to be in top egg-laying form. Because chickens are naturally prey animals, they do their best to disguise any illness from potential predators looking for an easy meal, and also from their flockmates and you. Which means by the time you notice that she's listless, crouching hunched over, and not going about her daily business like the others, she's already very ill. Before it gets to that, the first sign of illness is likely to be a decrease in egg production. Free-range chickens will be exposed to all kinds of diseases in their environment, but they will build up an immunity to them. Again, the most likely time for problems is when you bring new chickens into your flock. The new ones might not have immunity to the challenges in your environment and show the first signs of illness after you get them. Or they might bring new disease organisms with them that affect your other chickens. So it's always a good idea to quarantine any new chickens that you get and not just mix them immediately with your existing flock. Rather unexpectedly, a hen can also be too fat to lay. This doesn't seem to be a problem with the commercial hybrids, but some of the heftier heritage breeds can get overweight if they are fed too much starchy treats and don't have enough space or stimulation to move about much. An overweight chicken will spend more time than usual just sitting, and her breastbone will be hard to feel. You might even be able to feel the bulging fat pad filling her abdomen. If you can, that hen needs to work harder for her food. Try hanging some greens in the coop instead of just putting them at ground level. If she's not too young or too old, too fat or too thin, well fed and happy and healthy, and it's egg-laying season but you're still not getting any eggs in the nest box, then maybe she's laying but has chosen some other secret nest of her own. Of course, this is more likely if she's free-ranging, because she will simply have more options of suitable nesting places. Make sure that the nest box is as attractive as possible. Check out my video about how to do that. The easiest way to find out whether this is the problem is to lock up your chickens for 2 or 3 days. If she's laying, she will have no choice except to lay them where you can find them. Even if your chickens are laying their eggs in the nest boxes, Maybe the eggs are gone by the time you go to collect them because something is stealing the eggs from the nest. Broken eggshells near the nest are of course a big clue, but some animals will take the whole egg away completely. And it might not even be a wild predator. Check it's not the family dog or a farm piglet. It could even be your own hens eating the eggs straight from the nest. This kind of behaviour can start if an egg has a soft shell or falls on the floor and breaks. There are various tricks to find out whether a hen is eating eggs, including putting dye into the egg to identify the culprit, or simply using a camera to watch what's going on in the hen house. You should do all you can to avoid encouraging egg-eating behaviour in the first place, because it's very hard to stop once it starts. One final reason why your chicken might not be laying eggs is, of course, that she's a he. It's not always easy to tell, especially with some breeds, and if you're not very experienced at spotting the sometimes subtle differences. So it might take some time to realise it, but eventually you'll realise you will never get eggs from that rooster.